3:47 a.m., the North Sea, 60 miles off the Norwegian coastline. A Russian Tu-142 maritime patrol aircraft descended through the cloud cover, its belly bristling with sensors, sweeping the dark water below. It was looking for something, and it found it. A U.S. Virginia-class submarine running shallow, its communications mast barely breaking the surface. Within minutes, 2 Russian Su-35 fighters were scrambled from Murmansk. They weren't sent to engage. They were sent to watch, to measure, to count. It was a message without words. We see you, and we are ready. What came next was not a response. It was a reckoning. Across the Norwegian border, deep inside a NATO forward operating base carved into the granite of the Scandinavian hillside, 6 massive C-130J Super Hercules aircraft touched down in rapid succession. Their cargo ramps dropped before their engines had even finished spinning down. Rolling out of each aircraft were the components of something the Russian satellites had never seen deployed this far north: the LTAMDS, the lower-tier air and missile defense sensor. Unlike older radar systems that rotate on a fixed axis, the LTAMDS is a 360-degree active electronically scanned array. It doesn't sweep the sky. It watches the entire sky simultaneously, every direction, every altitude, all at once. As the system's generators roared to life, its digital eye opened. Within 4 minutes, it had cataloged every aircraft, every ship, and every electronic emission within 300 miles. Russia had just been seen seeing them. But radar alone does not stop an army. The second wave of aircraft brought the iron. 14 flatbed trucks rolled off transport ramps and disappeared into the tree line along the Finnish border. Each truck carried components of the NASAMS, the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System. Unlike fixed installations that can be targeted from space, NASAMS is modular. Its radar sits on one hill. Its launchers sit on another. Its command post sits somewhere else entirely, connected only by encrypted data links. You cannot destroy NASAMS by finding its radar, because the radar is not where the missiles are. As the launchers locked into their firing positions, the link came alive. A single encrypted frequency began stitching together every radar, every launcher, and every aircraft in the Norwegian theater into one breathing, thinking organism. A Norwegian F-35 orbiting at 35,000 feet above the Arctic Circle began feeding its sensor data directly into the NASAMS fire control network. The Norwegian mountains now had eyes that could see through clouds, darkness, and Russian jamming. The Russian response was predictable, and the NATO commanders had been counting on that. From the Kola Peninsula, 3 Iskander-K cruise missile launchers crept out of their hardened shelters. The Iskander-K does not fire ballistic missiles. It fires cruise missiles, low, slow, terrain-hugging weapons designed to slip under radar coverage by flying through valleys and behind ridgelines, like a knife slid under a door. The first volley launched, 8 cruise missiles accelerating to 500 miles per hour, dropping to treetop level, their terrain-following computers reading the ground beneath them the way a pianist reads sheet music. They were invisible, until they weren't. One of the F-35s orbiting above the cloud layer wasn't just feeding data to the ground. It was running a passive infrared scan of the entire horizon. It detected the heat exhaust of the cruise missiles against the frozen ground, a faint thermal smear moving at 500 miles per hour through a forest where nothing natural moves that fast. The targeting data transferred in milliseconds. In a frozen clearing 40 miles from the border, 6 Norwegian F-35As rolled into position. They didn't climb. They didn't accelerate into combat. They simply opened their internal weapons bays, because the F-35 carries its weapons inside its body, invisible to radar, and released their AMRAAM-ER missiles in a ripple fire sequence. The AMRAAM-ER is not designed to chase aircraft. It is designed to chase anything. Its active radar seeker doesn't wait for a ground station to guide it. Once released, it hunts independently. And unlike older air-to-air missiles that require the launching aircraft to keep pointing at the target, the F-35s had already turned away and descended back below the ridgeline before their missiles reached their targets. The Russian cruise missiles had no warning. They were flying at treetop level when the AMRAAMs arrived from above, diving at angles their terrain-following computers weren't programmed to handle. 6 of the 8 cruise missiles were destroyed in under 90 seconds. The remaining 2 veered off course as their guidance signals were overwhelmed by a wall of electronic noise pouring out of an EC-37B Compass Call aircraft orbiting silently over Sweden. The missiles flew in circles until they ran out of fuel and fell into the Norwegian Sea. The Russian command shifted tactics. If the air was closed, they would use the water. An Oscar II-class submarine, one of the largest attack submarines ever built, had been running silent beneath the North Sea for 11 days. Its mission was to close the Gok Gap, the strategic choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom that NATO surface ships must cross to reach the North Atlantic. If the Oscar II could hold that gap, it could threaten every resupply convoy crossing the ocean. What the Russian crew did not know was that they had not been alone for 9 of those 11 days. A U.S. Navy Seawolf-class submarine had been trailing them at a distance of 4 miles, running so quietly that its acoustic signature was below the ambient noise of the ocean itself. Every course change, every depth adjustment, every time the Oscar II rose to periscope depth to receive a transmission, the Seawolf recorded it, built a pattern, learned the rhythm. When the order came, the Seawolf didn't need to chase. It already knew where the Oscar II was going to be. 2 Mk-48 8-cap torpedoes were fired in a spread pattern. The Oscar II had 7 seconds of warning before its hull began to fail. The Gok Gap reopened. But it was what happened next that sent a different kind of message. Not to the Russian Navy, but to the Russian General Staff sitting in Moscow watching their screens go dark one by one. From a Royal Norwegian Air Force base, 2 P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft took off and began a slow racetrack orbit over the Norwegian Sea. The P-8 is not a combat aircraft in the traditional sense. It carries torpedoes and depth charges, yes, but its real weapon is information. Its sonar buoys, dropped in precise geometric patterns across hundreds of square miles of ocean, create an acoustic net invisible to any surface observer. Every Russian submarine in the region was now being listened to, and the Russian commanders knew it, because the P-8s made no effort to hide their radar emissions. They wanted Moscow to know the net was in the water. The message was clear: your submarines are visible to us. The question is what we choose to do about it. 3 Russian submarines that had been moving toward the gap turned around within the hour. The final move of the engagement didn't make a sound. Deep beneath the Baltic Sea, a fiber optic cable connecting Russian military installations suddenly went dark. Not cut, disabled. A NATO submarine equipped with specialized undersea cable interaction systems had located the line using acoustic mapping and made precise contact with the cable's outer casing. The disruption was surgical, targeted, and completely deniable. Communications between 2 Russian coastal defense headquarters suddenly had to route through satellite. And the moment they did, a constellation of Allied signals intelligence assets already orbiting overhead began reading every encrypted transmission, trying to find its path through space. The walls of the fortress were still standing, but the locks on every door had been quietly changed. What happened in the North Sea and Baltic theater wasn't a battle in the traditional sense. There were no front lines, no trenches, no columns of armor. It was a contest of systems, of sensors against countermeasures, of guided energy against hardened steel, of information against the fog of a frozen war that never quite announced itself. And there is one capability that almost no one mentions when discussing the F-35's role in these engagements. The aircraft carries a system called Multifunction Advanced Data Link, MADL. Unlike older tactical data systems that broadcast on a wide frequency that enemies can detect and locate, MADL transmits in an extremely narrow directed beam, point to point between aircraft. 2 F-35s can share sensor data, targeting solutions, and battle tracking in real time without broadcasting a single detectable radio wave into the open sky. The Russian electronic warfare operators were listening for the web of communications that normally connects a modern military force. They heard almost nothing, because the web wasn't in the air. It was moving silently between aircraft, below the threshold of any receiver on Earth capable of finding it. You cannot jam a signal you cannot hear, and you cannot defeat a force you cannot see.